But I still suggest you should go out and learn Blender, which is why I'm going to teach you Blender right now. Here we have one of my old builds. This is a Tudor house that I made back in 2018, and this thing is chock-a-block with optimization errors. Let's turn on the wireframe rendering for this thing. Ooh, yes, ooh, beautiful. Oh, look at all the glory of this. In fact, I reckon this thing has some weird collision too. Let's take a look at the collision of this. Ooh, looks like a gingerbread house, huh? Ain't that beautiful? What's going on with this door? Why is this door a union? Why did I make the door a union? What? Huh?
Oh. Hello.
Don't tell me. Don't tell me I did it. Don't tell me I did it. Oh.
It's mild orange.
Let's optimize this building together. The first thing is, let's see if there's a way we can tidy up some of the problems with this house. At the front of this house, you'll notice that it's made up of these unions like this. If I pull this out and let's take a closer look at this union, it is actually a circle with a negate circle inside it and then 2 bricks like that, which is honestly a pretty clever way of doing it. But that does mean that this single union is keeping track of 3 primitives being used to make it. Let's take a look at the wireframe of this, shall we? Honestly, I know this isn't the most visible. I apologize. But the wireframe of that doesn't look too bad, honestly. In fact, I would go so far as to say that wireframe would probably look the exact same if I made this a mesh. So, you know what? Good job. Actually, wait, hold up. Why is there like a random triangle there? That doesn't need to be there. Maybe I should make this a mesh. So there's a couple of these used everywhere. And the problem with these, I believe, is that I think these aren't the same union. I'm pretty sure these are using different IDs. Oh yeah, okay, so this is a union for some reason. These are separate, but this isn't, and this isn't. And I'm not entirely sure why. Because remember what I said earlier about component data? If I just ununion these back into their original shape, which, by the way, this is something that I should probably bring up now while it's happening. Sometimes when you union stuff, their shape just dramatically changes. If I separate this, you notice how the shape of it changes completely, even though it shouldn't. That's because it's still keeping the component data stored. And I think it's introducing floating point inaccuracy. I can't... if anybody actually knows what this is or why this happens, I don't know, but anytime you make a union out of cylinders, sometimes it will rotate the vertices of the cylinders, because you see there's a point here and there's a point here, right? Well, if I reverse it, now the point's down here and up here. I don't know why this happens. It's a weird quirk of unions that has always disturbed me, because you'll be building like a cylinder going into like another cylinder, and you'll union it, and all of a sudden it will rotate like that so they don't match up anymore, and it looks really bad and ugly. Just thought I'd bring that up while it was happening. So I guess that's the first step, just separating any unnecessary unions. That is an unnecessary union. That doesn't need to be a union at all. That is an unnecessary union as well. Okay. I think I probably unioned them. I think the reason why these are unions is because I unioned them so that I could move them together and duplicate them. But that's not the best thing to do. I should have just made them a group or just grabbed them together. Like, I don't know why I did it like that. All right, cool. Those unions are all sorted. Now I will be tidying them up later, but what else we got? Oh, okay, so this is a union. Let's take a look at this, shall we? You know what? Let's take a look at the wireframe of this. Yeah, the wireframe looks fine, but to be honest, let's try and turn this union into a mesh, shall we? So we're going to grab it, and we're going to right-click it, and we're going to go all the way down to Export Selection. And then I'm going to save it into my mesh folder, which I believe I have in here somewhere. There we go. All right, cool. So this is my meshes folder. I highly suggest if you're going to be doing this, you make your own meshes folder. And in fact, I'm going to create a new folder in here, and I'm going to label it Tudor House Meshes. We're going to double click in there, and we're going to save this in there as a bad, we'll do like B, corner, arch, support, something like that. Now I label it with a B because I know that that's the old version, that's the bad version. There's probably a better naming convention. That's how I do it. Now let's crack open Blender. I'm using version 3.30, but that's fine. It should still hopefully work for whatever new version you're doing. The first thing you want to do is you want to delete the cube in the middle. Just click it and then click the delete button or the backspace button. I think backspace works. Does backspace work? No. Delete does. If you don't have a delete key on your keyboard, then I guess you're screwed. Anyways, go to File in the top left and we want to import our .obj. We usually use .objs for studio meshes. So we're going to import a Tudor house mesh. B corner arch support. We're going to import. Hang on a second. Where's it gone? I don't see it. Where is it? Oh, hold up. It's all off in the distance here. How do we get over there? Well, to make using Blender a bit easier for people who are familiar with Roblox Studio, I actually use something called walk fly navigation. To enable it, press Shift and then Grave. If you don't know where Grave is, it's the button above Tab next to 1 below Escape. It's sort of that, it's got a bunch of weird symbols on it. Hold Shift, Grave, and you should enter this mode. And you'll be like flying around, kind of like how you do in Roblox Studio. E goes up, Q goes down. Very nice, right? If you hold Shift, you can actually go even faster. And if you scroll up, whilst in this mode, you can actually speed up how fast you move. And if you scroll down, you slow down how fast you move. So, I'm going to be using that a lot today to fly around. Alright, cool. So, here we've got our mesh. But it's a bit far from the origin, and we kind of want to fix that. So, the first thing I want to do is I want to press N on my keyboard. And this opens the transform menu. Very useful piece of kit. So in order to move this back, we select the object, and then we want to enter edit mode. This is where most of your work will be done. In the top left, you see object mode. If you hit tab on your keyboard, you swap to edit mode. Hit tab again, you swap back to object mode. Most of the time you spend in edit mode, but sometimes you want to be in object mode. So if you ever get lost, just press tab and you should end up back here. You'll know you're in edit mode when it says edit mode, and you can see the vertices. And you can select the vertices with these 3 settings next to edit mode. So object mode doesn't have them, but edit mode, if you press 1, 2, or 3, you swap between these 3 boxes here. This is vertices select. You can select the vertices, all the different points. Then 2 is edge select. You can select all the edges. And 3 is face select. You can select all the tris or the polys that make up your mesh. So, I'm going to just press 1, doesn't really matter which one I press, and I'm going to press A. A is select all in edit mode, and it selects absolutely everything. And while we're in here, we're going to set the median in this top right corner, and if you don't see this, make sure you press N to open it. We're going to set that to 0, we're going to set that to 0, we're going to set that to 0. Now there is some floating point inaccuracy, because guess what, that's not just a Roblox thing. And it should take it back to here. Now, if you want to skip this step, in Roblox Studio, you can just take this part and deliberately set its position in Studio to 0, 0, 0, like that, and then press F to teleport to it. And you'll see it here, and then export it. And that will help you skip that step if you don't want to do that. But why do that when you can just do it in Blender directly, you know what I mean? Now, alright, now that we've got our union near the origin of Blender's workspace, the first thing that I want to do is delete these extraneous vertices here, because I really don't think this extra bit of detail is required. So let's get rid of a few of these triangles, shall we? I'm going to grab this, and I'm going to shift click both of these vertices, and I'm going to delete them by pressing delete and delete vertices. Except, oh, what just happened there? That's weird. These vertices are still here, but it just deleted some faces. That's because what we have imported is an OBJ, or a wavefront OBJ, and anytime you import or export OBJs, they don't actually keep their vertices connected. This vertice is different to that vertice, so we need to stitch them together. That's why it says there's 42 vertices, because there's a lot of duplicate vertices. So, to tidy up, what you want to do is press A on your keyboard, and you want to merge those vertices together. To do that, press M for merge. And don't press merge at center because it will collapse the thing into an infinitesimally small point. Instead, Control Z to undo that. You want to press A, merge, and then merge by distance. Now, any vertice that was close to another one should connect to the other perfectly, like that. If I select a vertice and press G, you see that the vertice moves. G is the move button in Blender. Don't ask me why G is the move button, it just is. So let's go back to these two vertices. Let's select one, shift click the other one, press del, and then delete these two vertices. There we go, perfect. That's exactly what I wanted. Now we need to recreate this face. So we want to shift click all of these vertices and then just press F to create a new face. Ah, very nice. Now we've got a bit of a hole in the side of here, so let's shift click all of these vertices, press F, perfect. Shift click the ones on the other side, make sure you get the other side, press F, perfect. All right, cool. When you grab a vertice, you can grab a vertice and you can move it with either, like let's say I grab this face for example and I press S. This S is for scale, G is for move, and R is for rotate. And if you're in any of these operations, you can select which way. So if I press G and then I press X, it locks to an axis. If I press Z, it locks to the Z axis, and I press Y, it locks to the Y axis. Maybe I want to like move this up a little bit. So I'm going to select these two vertices. I'm going to press G, and then I'm going to move them on the Z axis right where I want them. Maybe I want to move these down, so I'm going to select both of these, G and then Z. I'm going to move it down a little bit, just to make it a little bit more of a curve. Now, one way you can see your triangles is by enabling your statistics. If you go up to overlays here, which should be visible even in object mode. So object mode has a shorter list. So let's go back into edit mode by pressing tab. Make sure we're in edit mode up here. We'll be in viewport overlays here. You can enable statistics by clicking that, and that will show you your triangle, face count, edge count, everything. You can actually set that to favorites. If we're back here and we right click on statistics, we can actually add to quick favorites. Now, if I press Q, if there's a setting in Blender that you want to save, right click it and add it to your quick favorites. And that means you don't need to go and find that every single time you open Blender. All right, honestly, I think I'm happy with how that looks. I think that's perfectly fine. It's 24 triangles, and it will say 23 faces, but that's because one of the faces is made up of 2 triangles. If I was to run around and if I press 2 on the keyboard to be line select and grab these center lines, including these ones as well, and select delete only edges and faces, that should open up the center. I'm going to go back to vertices select by pressing 1. I'm going to take all of these and I'm going to turn them into squares. You'll see that the try count is still 24, but the face count has dropped. I really don't know how much that matters. I'm going to go ahead and do it anyways, just because it makes my mesh look a lot neater. And in fact, while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to delete these back faces here, because if I go back to my Tudor house, you'll see that those faces aren't visible, right? Like, that's not visible. You can't see that. That's against a wall, so that's not going to be visible to the player. So I'm actually going to go ahead and delete those while I'm in Blender. So to do that, I'm just going to press 2. Now, if I've tried to delete these faces directly, let's say I press 3, and then I grab these 2 faces, and then I click delete, and I delete only edges and faces, that can happen, which is very problematic. You probably don't want that to happen. So instead, you want to click delete, and then delete only faces. But then that leaves the center line between the 2 triangles. So you want to press 2, grab that, and then delete edges, like that. I'm going to do the same here. I mean, if I delete that edge, it will still take the triangles with it. So just be careful. Make sure you select the right one. Only edges and faces. Only edges and faces. We're going to delete that extra little one there as well, because I don't want that there. All right, I think I'm happy with that. Let's go ahead and export it back into Roblox. Click File, click Export, go down to Wavefront OBJ, and now you need to find your mesh folder. Once you do find your mesh folder, one thing you can do is you can actually save it. So here's my Tudor House meshes. I double click that. And I want to save it into here, right? Well, before you do that, make sure you click this little plus button here as add bookmark, or just press Control B. Tells you the shortcut right here, but that means that any next time you want to do this, you just have to click there and you're straight into the correct folder that you want. All right, let's give this object a name in the bottom here. I'm going to call it G corner arch support because it's a G. It's a good corner arch support, right? Back in Roblox, we now want to import our new mesh. So in the View tab, you want to open your Asset Manager. So make sure View tab, Asset Manager is usually this top left one. And you'll open this thing. It will ask you to save to Roblox. You want to make sure you publish your place to Roblox. You don't need to make it a public place. You just have to publish it to Roblox. This will allow you to import stuff into your game. So we're going to press the bulk import button. And we'll open our folder. So let's go down to Tudor House Meshes. And we want to grab the OBJ. So we want G corner arch support.obj. Import, just click apply all. Just always click apply all. It's easiest that way. Wait for it to import. Perfect. All right. And it should pop up here in the recently added. So let's left click it, right click it, insert. And it should appear here. Let's pull it out, shall we? Let's take a look at what we got here. Oh my god, what's wrong with it? Oh, that's disgusting. What's happened is we've got some improperly flipped faces. Looks like we've got to go back into Blender to fix that problem. Back in Blender, let's go take a look at this mesh. It looks fine, right? Why has this happened? Why has this problem happened to us? Well, in edit mode, in the top right here, opening viewport overlays, scroll down to face orientation. This is another setting I suggest you favorite, by the way. Right click it, assign to quick favorites. Once it's in quick favorites, click it, and all of a sudden you see our culprit. Blue indicates a face that's facing towards you. Red indicates a face that's facing away from you. So this blue face, if I was to fly it up and around it, it's red on the other side. So we want to make sure that all of the blue faces are on the outside. To do that, in edit mode, press 3 to get the face select. Shift click all of the faces that appear red on the outside. And then you then want to flip them by pressing Alt N. And this will enable normals. Now flip I normally also add to quick favorites. So I just have to press Q. And there you go. Now this mesh should be perfect. So it's got red on the inside and blue on the outside. Okay, let's export it again, okay? It doesn't matter that it's still blue. This is just a rendering option. It will still export as a normal file. So let's export that. Back in Roblox, let's go back to bulk import. And let's bulk import our new mesh, shall we? Wait for it to import. All right, cool. It's imported. Insert with location. Let's pull this out of 0, 0, 0, and let's drag it over here. All right, let's take a look at what we got. This is our new mesh, but you might notice something a bit. It looks a bit, I don't know how to say it. It looks a bit weird. It's like too sharp, you know what I mean? You can see all the lines. It doesn't look, you know, it looks very low poly, you know what I mean? Especially if I was to rotate it into the sun, you see how like you can just see all the lines. It doesn't look great. We can actually fix this with some shading in Blender. So leaving that there, let's head back into Blender. I'm going to turn off face orientation here. So I'm going to go up to here. Oh, I can't see it. That's because I'm in object mode. Make sure you're in edit mode to see face orientation. There you go. Right. Let's fix this shading by going back into object mode, so pressing tab so we're back into object mode, selecting the object and then right clicking. Let's shade it smooth. There we go. Now let's export it again. So I'm going to export it as a .obj yet again. All right, let's import it again. Insert with location. Press F to teleport to it. Let's drag it over here. All right, let's give this the lighting check. Ah, that's a lot smoother, right? Much nicer. Now obviously, it's got a little bit of a ambient occlusion happening there. Ambient occlusion is like natural shadows near the crease of a seam, but it does look a lot smoother, especially when we flip it away from the sun. Actually, it looks a bit too smooth. I'm gonna be honest with you, Chief. This ain't it. I don't like this. I don't like this one bit. This looks weird as hell. It looks like they tried to stretch the lighting of a sphere around all the corners, which is exactly what's happening. We can fix that as well. Don't worry. Let's go back into Blender yet again. All right, back in Blender, clicking on the object, shading flat creates all of these creases that we don't want, but shading smooth makes it look really weird. How do we fix this? Well, one option we can do is shade auto smooth. Sometimes that might work. I'm going to add an edge split modifier. So in this bottom right corner here, we've got this little spanner, this little wrench, whatever you want to call it. And we're going to add a modifier. Now, you can try and search this whole list for edge split modifier, or you can just press E and it will give you the edge split. And now what this does is when it's shaded flat, so if we go back to, we're in object mode right now and we shade it flat, it doesn't really make much of a difference. But if we shade it smooth, you'll notice that it looks correct. All of these, like, all of the edges along here are smooth, and yet all of the corners that actually should be corners are sharp. That's very nice. Why is this? Well, the edge split modifier creates edges every single time there's something above this degrees. And you can actually adjust this. So depending on the mesh that you're using, if I was to make this all the way up, you see how it's smooth? It's perfectly smooth. If I slowly decrease the edge split modifier number, you should eventually notice it pop. Right there, right there. Below or at 90 degrees, all of these edges are 90 degrees edges, right? But this isn't a 90 degrees edge, so we still got to keep going. So at some point it should pop in right there at around 67. Okay, cool. And if we were to keep going with this edge split modifier, so I'm dragging it to the left right now. I'm just clicking right in the box and I'm dragging it to the left. If we keep going at around there, at around 17 degrees, this first edge pops in. So that must be like 18 degrees or 17 degrees. And if I keep going at around 15 degrees, these two pop in as well. How interesting. So I guess we just got to put it between 66 and 15 degrees. So let's just put it at a nice comfortable, let's just throw it at like 50. It really doesn't matter. We've got the desired outcome that we want. Now, obviously this will change. If I was to go back into edit mode and I select these two vertices and I was to move them by pressing G, G is the move button, and then I lock it to an axis by pressing X. No, that's not the right axis. Pressing Y. No, that's not the right axis. Pressing Z. There we go. That's the one I want. If I was to move this up like that, you can see it become a sharp corner like that. So press that, press Z, move it down. No. Where do I want to move it? Tell you what, let's take a look at it from the side. If I click this button, you can see the mesh look like that. Press G. Make sure we're moving it on the Z axis. I'm going to move it there. And then I'm going to enable X-ray in the top right, which is Alt-Z, usually as a shortcut. This allows me to select both vertices. And I'm just going to move that there. No, I'm going to move that up. Move that up, because I want it to be kind of like sharp. There you go.
Are you ready?
Cool.
It's mild orange.
Alright, let's turn off X-ray in the top right here. Alright, the smooth shading still looks good. Alright, let's export it again, shall we? Go back into Roblox Studio. Now we've got a fourth version. Apply all. Insert with location. There we go. Let's take a look at this. Alright, this looks very nice. It's a lot smoother than all of our previous meshes. I like it. Alright, cool. Alright, now I am happy with this, but I'm gonna be honest. I know I deleted these back faces, and, you know, it works perfectly fine. I could definitely use this mesh right now. Like, if we move it over to the Tudor house and make it wooden, like, that's not too far off, to be honest. Make sure it's the right color. It does suit. It does fit the build, and you won't see those back faces. My only problem is that having these back faces deleted means that I can't use this mesh anywhere else. For example, what if I wanted to, like, let's say I want to make a bridge like this, okay? And then I Control D to duplicate it, paste it over here, drag it over here, and then I rotate 90 degrees. I've created this lovely arch, right? But you can't walk on the top of it because it looks like that. In order for that to work, I'd have to go ahead and grab a part, put it on top, make it the same color and material. And that's a lot of extra work for something that I would probably actually would rather have just be a single mesh. Remember what I said earlier about instancing, where the more meshes you have, the more your game has to download off of Roblox CDN? Well, here's the thing. If I have a mesh that I'm trying to use for this bridge, and for some reason I decide to put a top face on that mesh, and then I have a separate, more optimized mesh for these, why not just use the same mesh twice? It's not going to cost any extra performance. We know that those triangles are going to be culled because of backface culling that I mentioned earlier. So why even bother removing these faces directly? I may as well just add them back. So, for one more time, let's go back into Blender and let's make the future life of myself easier. Put a face there. Select these back vertices, put a face there. And lastly, make sure I check my face orientation. They're blue, perfect. Let's export this one more time, shall we? So now I've got a much better mesh because I can actually use it if I make sure I double check that the size isn't weird. There we go, it does have a weird size. I don't know why it has a weird size. I think the mesh itself probably came with a weird size. That can be something I could fix. In fact, you know what? I may demonstrate that now, actually. Screw it, why not? My mesh has a lot of weird size values, and I don't like that. So let's fix that. To make this easier for myself, I'm going to go into edit mode, and I'm actually going to turn on X-ray in the top right, and I'm going to press Y, and I'm going to go ahead, and I'm going to delete this side of the mesh. So now I've just left with a flat face. The next thing I want to do is I want to grab this vertice, and I want to give it some better coordinates. So I think the X coordinate is fine. That's a nice even number, but the Y coordinate, that's a lot of floating error. I really don't want any of that. Let's just set it to something random like 1.5. There we go, much nicer. The Z coordinate is basically 0.897, like that's just 0.9, right? But nah, let's make it even more round. Let's make it 0.1. And now that that's 0.1, that's moved over from there. So let's make sure that this Z coordinate is also 1. That Y coordinate, let's also make it 1. And because that has dropped down a bit, we want to make sure that this Y coordinate is also 1. And this Z coordinate is also 1. Oh wait, no, it's come over here. Why has that done that? It's actually -1. So let's keep the negative value. There we go. Oh, but now that that's happened, that's moved over. So let's make this -1. Perfect. This is much more sensible now. Now I could actually use this mesh in a lot of different applications because it's got a very normal size value to it. And if I want to, just click X and I can move these vertices along until they're where I'm happy with them. In fact, I might actually add an extra vertex here. Let's do Shift D to duplicate. Let's put that vertex there, for example. Let's click on this vertex and delete only edges and faces. In fact, let's delete all of them, only edges and faces. And now we're just left with points floating in space. Let's move our points somewhere nice and sensible. And now, let's stitch it all back together by selecting each face and building it back to where it belongs. There we go. Alright, I want that there. I want that there. I want that there. I want that there. Now, what we want to do, turn off X-ray in the top right, grab the whole thing, and then press E to extrude. Now, it's selected an axis for us. We want to make sure we move it along the X-axis, and we actually want to move it along a very specific amount because we know that everything is 0.25 to the right. Or at least I believe so. Let me just double check before I run my mouth. Yeah, so this is minus 0.25. Select the whole thing, press E, make sure it's moving on this axis by pressing X, right? Let's move it to the opposite of that. So that is actually going to be 0.5 over. In order to do that, you can actually type in how far you want to move it. So you don't need to eyeball and freehand it. Just type in 0.5. And then the top left there, you'll see that it can move it. And this works for every operation. If I want to move it G, and I want to move it on an axis, like let's say the y-axis, and I want to move it exactly 1, I can press 1. Nah, 1's not enough. Let's move it 2, or 3, or 4. Press delete, press 5. Actually, I want to move it 5 in the other direction. Just press minus, and it will move along like that. Actually, I want to move it on the other axis. Press X. Oh, I want to move it on the Z-axis. Press Z. Actually, I want it to go up. Press minus again to negate the previous minus. Just pressing minus swaps between the two. So those are the different options you have available to you. Same works for scaling. If I press S to scale something, and I want to scale it by 0.5, actually, that makes it smaller because it's half of the size. So I want to delete that and make 1.5. There we go. Now it's actually bigger than it was before. 1.75. You know, those are all the different options you have available to you. Or, last but not least, you can rotate. Let's say I want to rotate it. Oh, it's rotating on a weird axis right now. So let's lock it to... No, I don't want to rotate on the x-axis. No, I don't want to rotate on the z-axis. No, actually, I do want to rotate on the z-axis. Okay, let's rotate it 45 degrees. Actually, I want it to rotate the other way. Press minus to change which way it's rotating. So those are your different options that are available to you. Now, you might actually notice that we have introduced floating point errors by doing all of that weird operations to this. You see how all of these vertices are now all have weird values in them? That's what happens when you rotate stuff unnecessarily. So let's try and undo all that. There we go. It doesn't hurt. I mean, like, this is basically just 0. Like 0.009. Just make that 0. Come on. All right, we grab this mesh, and then we're just going to press E. We're going to move it over. We're going to set the median for this to be 0.25 in the positive direction. So that's 0.25, and that's minus 0.25. Very nice, very beautiful. All right, cool. All right, back over in Studio, we're going to import our 6th mesh. All right, if we copy this thing's size and then paste it into our new mesh, we finally, and then we'll copy the position as well, paste it into our new mesh. We finally have a mesh that actually does this job without needing an extraneous part to cover up the top faces. Because we know that those back faces aren't going to get rendered anyways. See? You see this line here? If I go underneath, I can't see that line there. So it works perfectly. What a nice mesh. Alright, this mesh should be perfect for use, right? Let's grab this, and let's copy over all of the properties from this into it. Now, before we do that, we want to make sure we dress this mesh up. We want to make sure that this mesh is perfect. And we want to do this first, because if you fix a mesh before you start pasting it everywhere, and then you discover that it was unanchored, which is the first thing we're going to check. We're going to check in properties. We're going to go all the way down. Is it anchored? No, it isn't. If you want to anchor it, press Alt and then A, or just click this box to anchor it. That's the first thing you should always do whenever you import a mesh. The second thing you should do is press Alt S this time to open this thing again. Type in comp, search in show decomposition geometry. Let's take a look at the collision of this mesh. Default collision looks fine, but I'm going to be honest, mate. I'm going to turn the collision fidelity to precise convex decomposition. I think that's going to match it much nicer. It's going to make a lot more sense for the player. We're going to set the collision to that. Now, another thing that I'm going to mention, the next setting I want to select is render fidelity. Now, I normally set this to performance, but automatic should work fine. However, with this mesh, it is so simple that it really doesn't matter which one you select, because I don't think this mesh has any LODs. I'll bring up LODs with a later mesh in time. So I'm just going to set render fidelity to automatic for the minute. What else? Cast shadow. With most Trader Town maps these days, you want to make sure your cast shadow is on anyways, because we're using shadow map now instead of compatibility. And then brick color. Well, first I can't see the brick color, so let's go to Studio settings. Let's turn off decomposition geometry. Let's set it to wood. Now, one last feature that I want to bring up is double-sided. Let's say, for example, you need to be inside this mesh for whatever reason. Double-sided causes the interior to be rendered. So both sides of the triangles are treated like a front face. Now, I believe this increases tries, I don't know if it increases tries, but I do think it increases rendering. I'm not entirely sure. Like if we turn on double-sided and turn on wireframe rendering, and then turn on, you can see that it's actually rendering extra. Like the back faces are now being rendered, as you can see. So double-sided is probably best to be used in like the weirdest edge cases. I've never used it myself. Like you could use it here, for example, but I mean, that doesn't really do quite what you wanted because there is no triangles here to be double-sided anyways. Double-sided does actually fix this problem, but the reason why I didn't bring that up back then is because I don't want you doing double-sided for silly reasons like that. If you have a problem like this, you know how to fix it. You flip the faces around. So I'm turning off double-sided. I never have it on. Never have it on unless you absolutely need to. All right, the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to name this Kai Corner Arch Mesh. I like to put mesh in the name of my meshes so that if I type mesh into workspace, it comes up. And I also put Kai in my meshes because if I put in Kai, I can find the stuff that I myself have created. It's very nice. In fact, because of this, a lot of Trader Town maps apparently use my meshes now. So my name is in just like almost every Trader Town map now for some reason. I don't know why that's happened. It's just has. So let's take the position and the color of this. So let's grab the color of that and paste it into my new lovely mesh. Okay, cool. And then let's take the size. And then lastly, let's take the position of this. Now, one last thing that I didn't point out, but I'm going to set the orientation to 0, 0, 0, is this can sometimes happen. Yeah, so as you can see, this actually is the wrong way round. What happens is anytime you import a mesh, for some reason it flips it around relative to what it was in Roblox Studio. This is a real problem for me, and it has been a problem in the past. If I pop on over to Archipelago version 2.3, you'll notice that this dumpster is facing backwards. Now, the reason why this dumpster is facing backwards is because this is my mesh. I created this model. Obviously, I didn't make the original model, but I did take that old model, and I spent several days stitching it back together and optimizing it. And a lot of that extra work was created because this has its own UV. So I had to figure out how to UV unwrap. That was a whole ordeal, and I'm not going to be covering that today. I might do it in a separate video, but honestly, like, you might not need to know how to UV unwrap for most basic meshes. But for this dumpster, you guys know this dumpster normally faces this way, right? Not this way. So why is it backwards? Well, when I created this mesh, I gave it to Hunty so that he could replace all the default dumpsters and all the maps with this new optimized dumpster model, which is great, right? The problem is, because I gave him the mesh, all of the meshes I gave him had been flipped around. And because they were flipped around, anytime you would load a map, all of the meshes would be flipped the wrong way because it was a new default mesh. The same goes for stuff like this wrench, which I optimized. Even stuff like the ammo, which I myself optimized myself. As a result, Hunty had to hard script it so that any object that is imported in using these default models needs to then be flipped 180 degrees around the other way. Which means that when you load it in as a Trader Town map, the Trader Town engine detects that this is a dumpster and replaces it with a backwards facing dumpster. So to go around this problem, rather than fix the issue, I just took my dumpster and I flipped it backwards. So now when it pastes in, it flips the dumpster around that way. So if you're going to be importing models and you want to replace something, for example, if I go over here and I paste in a cylinder, and then I grab, what's the orientation of that cylinder? Give it the exact same orientation, and then paste the position into here. All right, perfect. That actually works perfectly, and that's because I made it work perfectly. So what can sometimes happen is, because the cylinders in Roblox have a weird orientation, what you'll do is you'll try and replace all the cylinders in your map with a new mesh that replaces the cylinder, like an octagon of some kind, and it will be flipped 90 degrees to where it should be. You could just manually fix this for every single cylinder, or make your life a little bit easier and just make sure that you flip your Blender model around. So if we go back into here, and we go back to this flipped mesh here, rather than try to just manually flip everything around and do a lot of extra work, I'm just going to go back into Blender and I'm going to flip it in Blender. So back in Blender, I'm just going to, all it takes is edit mode, or even object mode might do this. Press A, just select it, press R, and then make sure I'm rotating it on the axis I want to, Z axis, and then we're going to type in 180. Bam, done. That's the last change I'm making. File, export, wavefront OBJ. All right, we're going to import that, apply all, insert with location, pull it out of the ground. And again, because this is a new mesh, again, I got to make sure it has the right properties. So the first thing is it anchored? No. Alt-A. Does it have a good collision fidelity? No. Precise convex decomposition. What's the render fidelity? Automatic. Let's make it performance. It doesn't really matter in this case, but I'll explain why later. Gonna give it the name Chi Corner Arch Mesh. There we go. Alright, cool. And then, last but not least, let's make sure it has cast shadow on. Yep. We're gonna copy the color of this. Yep. We're gonna paste it into that. Yep. And then we're gonna grab the material, wood. Yeah, it's wood. Okay, let's do that. Let's make it wood. Perfect. Now, before I add this, I'm actually going to duplicate this house. And I'm going to move it over here. And we're going to work on this house over here. Alright, so now that we've got our finished house here, we're going to start replacing all of these unions. So the first thing is I'm going to ungroup this house. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put a folder into this house. I like to store things in folders as opposed to groups, because groups are annoying to work with. I'm going to name this Tudor House. I'm going to drag all of these models into there, and then I'm going to ungroup the group. So now it's a folder. And then I'm going to take this. Larry, yeah, you can be a group. House, let's ungroup it. There we go. Right. So, let's start. Let's grab all of these unions and replace it with this one. So let's take this guy. Let's grab this thing's position. And let's paste them in. Right, okay, that's the wrong size. Let's see, size, copy, paste the size, copy the position, paste it over. There we go. If I delete that and move that in, we have now replaced our first union with a mesh. So let's work our way along the line, shall we? Alright, so now we need to take a look at what other things we can optimize in this build. These are a union, this is probably the worst case of a union, because this doesn't need to be a union. If I ununion this, if I separate this, it's actually a bunch of separate unions. Oh my god. And if I separate these, oh my god. And then if I separate those, they're just parts. These are just really tiny parts. So it's a union out of a union out of a union out of a bunch of parts. That is so bad. That is so bad. This is genuinely the worst case scenario of a union, right? Let's just do this entire door in one go, shall we? Let's start optimizing this door. So let's break it up into its component parts. So I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to move this 5 studs over. I'm going to move these 5 studs over. And then I'm going to move these front studs and back studs over there. Alright, so these top studs seem to stick out more because these ones are inside, but these ones are on top. And in fact, the studs are not even aligned with the door. They're floating off of it. So they're fine on this. Ah, right, I see. So the studs on the front side are fine, but the studs on the back side are not. So let's start by taking all these studs. Control-Shift-U and ununion it until they're just parts. And then we want to find the exact distance. I'm presuming it's maybe like 0.1. No, okay, so it might be like 0.4. No, 0.2. No, 0.3 maybe? 0.3 gets us the distance, but it's actually less than that. Maybe 0.25. That looks about correct. Alright, so 0.25 is the distance that these need to go out. Let's do the same for all of these. So 0.25, 0.25. And I can't... This is what I mean by collision. I can't select this right now. And the reason why is if I turn on collision view, this weird-ass union that I've created has collision that's blocking me. So while I work on this, I'm going to set this collision. I'm going to be changing this in a second, but I'm going to set this collision to that, just so I can work around it. There we go. Let's grab this stud. And let's just really quickly run through and move all these studs through the door. Alright, let's quickly delete this union and check that all these studs work. Yep, they are. Okay, cool. And now I want to drag through these bigger ones. Now, I don't think 0.25 is the right distance. No. Probably closer to 0.5. 0.45. Yeah. Alright, let's do that. Alright, cool. Now let's delete this back union. There we go. So we have just saved probably a good chunk of performance by removing that completely unnecessary union upon a union upon a union. I don't know why I did that. I think I did that to keep them together, to drag them around, but you don't want to use unions for that, because that's just a bad idea in general. Use groups for that, use models for that, or just grab the whole selection. Now, I'm going to leave those studs where they are, because I want to drag this over, and let's fix this, okay? This is an example of something that doesn't even need to be a union whatsoever. If I remove this, if I separate this, what's the point in that? There's no point in cutting holes in something when you can just create those gaps with parts itself. So I'm going to take this back part here. I'm going to Control D to duplicate it. I'm going to drag it up until it meets roughly where it needs to be there. I'm going to reselect the original one, Control D, and move it down here. Like that. Yep. Alright. I'm going to select the middle part again. I'm going to Control D and move it all the way over to this edge. I'm going to Control D again and move it all the way over to that edge. And then I'm going to grab that side edge. I'm going to Control D and try and line it up as best I can. I must have used some weird increment here. I don't think I did use 0.5. I think I used 0.25 and I scaled it up. Yep, there it is. Okay, of course it's some weird value. Thank you, old Kai. Why you could have just why use seriously, no, why would I use 0.125 when I could have just used 0.1? Why did I have to make it harder for myself? Whatever. Okay. And then we're going to grab it one more time and we're going to not Control D it. We're just going to grab the last piece and we're going to hold Control to scale it down like that. Alright, I need to be even more precise than that. 0.5. Yeah, that looks to be it. And then let's drag this top bit down, because it needs to be flush. And then let's delete these negative parts, because they don't need to exist. Perfect. I've just created a perfect door. Now, there's going to be some Z fighting here. So there's a few solutions to that. The first one is to make sure that there's no more overlap on both the top and the bottom. And then lastly, you'll see that it is Z fighting on this middle central bar here. I do have a cheeky solution to this. One solution that I would give to most people is actually to just do that. And the reason why I suggest that is because doing so, it still does its job, but it adds a little bit of extra depth to your door, especially if you're on higher graphic settings, which if you go to File, Studio Settings, and you're back in here, and if you go all the way down to Rendering, you can change the editor quality level. This is basically like the quality level in Roblox. So 21 would be the same as quality 10. And then level 1 is the same as, you know, like you see how it looks like quality 1, right? So let's set the editor quality to 21. This lets you see the game with all of its ambient occlusion. So ambient occlusion is like the engine will notice that there's a corner here and will add a little shadow there. I could probably make it a bit more obvious if I grab like a big brick like this. You see how there's like a shadow in that corner? if I go back to editor quality and I set it back to 1, the ambient occlusion disappears. The ambient occlusion actually helps, even with or without, this adds a little bit of extra depth to your models. So I do generally suggest making a noticeable change, if you want, to your models. If like there's Z fighting and you don't want the Z fighting here anymore, I'll make it more obvious by setting this to green. You can see all the Z fighting happening. But if you absolutely need it to be the right size, a cheeky solution, obviously these side bits don't need to be extruded out that far, so those you can eliminate that Z fighting. But this center bit, like, either do the thing that I suggest, make it thicker, make it thinner, whatever, your choice, or you can cheat a little bit by typing into the move thing 0.999 studs, holding control and dragging it out like that, and then changing that to just 1 stud, right? And then holding control and dragging it back in. And all of a sudden, it is now 0.001 studs thinner. You can very barely see the edge there. It's no longer Z fighting. This outer board can just be moved in a little bit. There we go. That fixes that Z fighting. So that will fix most Z fighting issues that you'll stumble into. I believe these probably Z fight as well.
Are you ready?
Yeah, they do. Okay, let's drag these in. 0.05. Let's drag this one in as well. Awesome. And a Z fighting on the bottom. Let's just drag it all the way up. Perfect. Drag it all the way down. Perfect. Alright, cool. So that is one way to fix Z fighting. I do want to bring up, though, if you do this technique, there is a problem with it. So let's grab a part like this, for example, for demonstration purposes, and let's make it nice and big, like that. And let's duplicate another one and make it a different color, like blue. Let's use like a nicer color. Alright, so we've got Z fighting in the middle here, right? Alright, so if we have 2 overlapping parts and you do this technique at a large scale, for example, which I wouldn't normally suggest, and the reason why I wouldn't suggest doing it at a large scale is for this exact reason. So I've just done it. It's now 0.1 studs off. The reason why you don't want to do that is because the further away you get from objects, the more likely that Z fighting will come back as the camera gets far enough away that the accuracy of the points it's seeing disappear. You can see the Z fighting happening from this distance. So if you're going to do something large scale, I would highly suggest you don't do it. Don't do the trick. Instead, just add a little lip. It's fine. Make it a part of the aesthetic choice of the map. Alright? Because if I move further away from a 0.1 thing, it doesn't Z fight at all. By the time it starts Z fight, I can't even see it. That thing's invisible to me now. And it didn't Z fight once. So, just thought I'd give you that little tidbit. With this final bit of wood, we're going to put that back in there. And then we're going to move all these pieces with 5 studs. I keep everything 5 studs so I can just snap it back into place. And then I'm going to grab this whole thing. And rather than unioning it to keep it together, I'm just going to group it. And I'm going to name this door. And I'm going to, because it's back where it started, it should just snap into place. 5 studs. Perfectimondo. Optimized door. And I didn't even use a single mesh. I just used parts, because there was no reason for there to be unions here. Now you might be pointing out, oh, but the texture of the wood is going sideways here and it's not here. Fine, we can fix that. It's okay. All you do is rotate the wood, and then let's give that same treatment to a bunch of these other parts. So let's grab all these, let's rotate them. I could do the same for these uprights, but I actually think they look good. So we just grab these upright parts and we take their size, and then we're going to delete that, that, and that. Goodbye. And then we're going to take these new ones and we're going to drag them into place. Bam. And then we're going to drag this door back where we want. Perfectimondo. Would you look at that? Now the wooden beams are actually horizontal. Now I actually want to show you an example of a use case for unions that people do that is never justified. This is actually a union. If you take a look at this giant brick here, it's actually a union. Now this is problematic. The reason why this is a union is it's just 2 bricks that have been unioned together because the texture has a seam. It doesn't line up. Don't do this. There's no point to doing this. Because, again, remember all the reasons why unions are bad? You're introducing all of them for no reason whatsoever. What you should instead do is take this brick, duplicate it, rotate it, like that, and then make sure that it fits in. So let's make sure that the size is good. Make sure it's nice and lined up. Is it lined up here? Let's check. Easy way to check if it's lined up is if it's Z-fighting. It's not Z-fighting on the front, so let's fix that. It's not Z-fighting on this side, so let's fix that. There we go. That looks perfect. Alright, let's move it over. Let's delete that part. Let's move that, snap it back into place, grab the color of this, and then put the color in there, and then move this part back into place. Now again, it still has a seam. So instead, move this part over. Still has a seam, maybe give it a quick rotate. Oh, would you look at that? Now I can't even tell that there's a seam. Where is the seam here? Can you see it? If you said on the left, then you were correct. You can fix that problem without making a union. It's completely pointless. There's no reason to make a union to align textures. Alright, now that we've optimized that door, there's something that I actually want to check. It is not anchored. Because I ununioned those parts, they weren't anchored. So what can happen sometimes is all the bricks that make up that door aren't anchored. Easy solution to that. Just hold Alt, select everything, Alt A, make sure it's anchored up at the top here. That should fix the problem. Now, the problem with a door like this is, let's say you unanchor it or you make it a door of some kind. All the pieces fall apart independent of each other. Meshes can help solve this problem. So let's try and turn this into a mesh, shall we? I'm going to grab this door and I'm going to export the model. I'm going to export selection. And before I do that, I'm going to save myself some time. I'm going to just set the model's position to 0, 0, 0. So it's over here. And then I'm going to export selection. B door. Save. Alright, so in Blender, we want to take our thing, and I'm just going to quickly turn off face orientation, and I'm also going to delete our old model. Don't need it anymore. If you wanted to save this, by the way, I highly suggest you click File, and then instead of exporting, you want to click Save As. And you can save it in the same place as everything else. It will be a blend file instead of a wavefront OBJ, and name it cornerarch.blend. That way you can go back into Blender and you don't need to redo all the stuff. Because let's say I was to try and open this as the OBJ. Let's say I import the OBJ that I exported just now, right? Like G corner arch support final.obj. Let's say I import that, right? You then get back the same problem that we had at the start, where all of the vertices aren't connected. So keep that in mind, because you're going to need to press Alt A, and then you're going to need to merge by distance. And then when you do that, the edge split modifier isn't here, so you need to create the edge split modifier again, and then you need to tweak it to your liking. And then you need to make sure, it's just a lot of extra work. So make sure you save your blend files so that you can go back to them later and fix it if you want. Anyways, we're not working on that right now. We're going to delete that. We're going to file, import, and then we're going to import bdoor.obj. Now, you'll know that this wasn't a union, and it isn't. It's all a bunch of separate parts. Let's press Alt-A, and let's merge by distance. Now, this might merge some parts together that weren't merged before, but that's fine. We're okay with that for the minute. Let's try and turn this into a mesh. So let's just literally export it right now. We've merged by distance. We want to shade it flat. That's fine. We're going to go to File. We're going to go to Export. And we're going to export it as an OBJ. And we're going to make it a mesh. We're going to do G door certed. Right, perfect. We got the door. And you'll notice something immediately has happened. It has lost all color. And in fact, even if we was to set it to wood and then try to copy over the color, because it's all one mesh, you can only make this mesh one color. So, you know, even though this is unanchored, and if I was to go test and then run, it works like our door does now. It's all one solid piece. You can't have multiple different colors. Well, there is a solution to this. If we go back to Blender, we can actually paint the colors into the model directly. How do we do that? Well, we want to go to... So what you want to do is, in this top left thing here, we've been swapping between object mode and edit mode all day, but let's try and change it to vertex paint. All of a sudden you'll see what the final export colors actually look like, and we can actually paint on this. So if I grab this and change it to, I don't know, green, you can see that I'm starting to paint it green. So let's go grab the colors from Studio, and everything is this brown. So let's grab and copy the hex color of that brown, and then let's click this, and then let's click hex, and let's paste in the new hex value. And now we can go around and paint this brown. We can change the radius, so let's make it nice and big, and that should cover everything. I'm also going to turn on X-ray, so it allows me to paint everything in the back. And the way this works is it's actually just painting the vertices. So if we turn off that, you'll see, if I like click on this corner here, you see that this vertice has changed to the bright color, and then it stretches across to the next vertice. So you can even see the triangle here. If I go back into wireframe, you see there's a triangle there. So it doesn't quite, it's not the most accurate thing, but it is an option you can use to try and paint stuff. So let's just run around, make sure that everything's painted. And you want to make absolutely sure that everything is fully, completely painted, because sometimes what can happen is you need to click multiple times or hold for multiple times. That's why you want to pump up radius and strength here, because sometimes you'll like have, yeah, for example, these studs here I'm pretty sure aren't supposed to be white. So just make sure you paint over them a bit more. I think that might have just been a lighting thing, but you never know. I like to just come at it from all angles, make sure it's all fully 100% painted the color I want. Alright, so now that you've painted it, the next step is to selectively paint the things you want. So let's start with these studs, shall we? Let's make these studs the color that we want. So let's go back into Studio. Let's grab the color of these studs. 11111. Right, perfect. Go back into Blender and change the color to 11111. And now let's crank down the radius. And let's just click on these individual studs. And let's start painting them in. Now the way these studs work is they are, if I turn on X-ray in the top right here, they just extrude through, right? So make sure when you're painting them that you then paint the back side as well. So I'm just going to work my way through, making sure to not accidentally click a triangle that I don't want to paint. In Studio, we've got these little parts here. I believe the color is a different one entirely. So let's grab that color, back into Blender. Make sure we put that color in there. But now we need to actually find those, because if I can't turn on edit mode, you see that vertices there, and that vertices there. So we need to somehow paint those vertices without painting those. If I was to click on that vertice there, you see that it's actually painting across the whole door. That's because those vertices have been merged in, which we don't want. So we're going to cheat a little bit. We're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we're going to do the same on the other side. Make sure we're shift clicking all of these vertices. And what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate these. We're going to do Shift D. So now we've got a duplication. And we're going to press that axis. And we're going to move it over by, we're just going to type in 5. No, let's move it away a bit further. 10. There we go. Hit enter to select. Right, so over here we've got the brown center, and then what we can do is we can actually just select these interior lines and delete them. Very nice. So now if we go back into paint mode, when we paint this corner, it shouldn't paint that. But we are painting the inside of this door, so we do still need to isolate it. So let's grab these vertices. We're going to turn off X-ray, and we're going to move these away. like that. And we're going to move these on Y again, but -10. And while we have it all split up, I don't think we need these interior bits here. So let's just grab all of them and delete them. I don't think they're necessary. And because these faces are only visible on the front here, I don't think we need the underside either, especially because the underside seems to be made of a weird collection of extra faces for some reason. I don't know why there's extra faces down here, so let's just delete them. They're not necessary, and they're not making the model better. And in fact, if I press this button here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to delete, turn on X-ray just so I can actually select everything. I'm going to delete the middle of that, and I'm going to move up a bit, and I'm going to do the same to this above bit, because all these extra vertices are not necessary. And in fact, I'm going to do the same to this. I'm going to delete the side of this entirely as well, because those don't need to have their side faces. In fact, while I'm looking at this whole mesh, let's just run around and see if there's any side faces that don't need to exist. Let's go inside this. There's a side face here that doesn't need to exist. You can't see that.
Oh, hello. How are you? Are you ready? It's mild orange. So you want me to stay? But I should go.
Okay, alright, I think I'm happy with that. Alright, let's start painting this. So we're back in Vertex Paint node, and now let's just... I can crank up the radius and just go absolutely ham with this, just making sure I don't paint behind myself by accident. Let's lower the radius just a little bit, just so I can make sure I paint this nicely. Very nice, lovely jubbly. Alright, cool. And now let's combine all of this together. So let's go back to edit mode. Let's select all of those vertices. Press G, press Y to move it on that axis. I haven't selected that back vertice. Let's turn on X-ray and let's select everything. Now it's all moving together. Let's press Y so it moves on that axis. Let's press 5. Oh wait, I didn't move it by 5, did I? I moved it by 10. There we go. Perfect. Let's grab these ones. G, Y, 10, minus. There we go. Alright, let's turn off X-ray. And in Vertex Paint, let's go back to paint mode just to see what it looks like. This is what it looks like in painted mode. Check for any random tries that seem out of place or anything painted that seems weird. Now that looks good to me. Alright. Let's export this. Alright, insert with location. Now it says mesh has been resized. This will happen with FBX files. That's fine. You can actually just take the original, copy the size over, paste it in. There we go. Should be the right size. Alright. So here's the OBJ. As you can see, it has no color. And here's the FBX. And in fact, I think the FBX has automatically been pasted in with its texture ID. If I delete the texture ID, like that, it will go back to plastic. So if I was to try and change this material, if you're playing Trader Town especially, you might think that this door is wooden, but it might still be plastic. So you'll hit it with your crowbar and it'll make a plastic sound. So make sure you set it to wood planks and delete the texture ID because you just used it. Unless you're actually using a texture ID, just delete it. Now, one thing I want to mention about this is you'll see it's much darker. This is because you painted it, any extra color added on top just makes it darker. So you actually want to make sure that you set the color of this to exactly FFFFF, white. And that should hopefully match that. No, it's actually wood that we're using here. Right, so this is one downside to using FBX files. They can only be one texture. I believe in Trader Town 2 there'll be workarounds where you can use models for doors, but I thought I would teach you about vertex paint today because I thought, you know, it's very useful. Archipelago's doors use vertex paint to make the inner bits like a different color, just to make them stand out. Anyways, this is a final door, and if we were to click run up here, as you can see, it can work like a door, unlike the parts. So let's use this door in place of all of these monstrosities. There we go. A nice new door. Let's look at it in wireframe. Oh, beautiful. I mean, it's still basically the same wireframe as before, but it's just a lot neater. And it's a single mesh that's being loaded now, so this door can actually work as a door. It's a single door, it can be moved, it will be solid, it can work as a prop if you want, you can give it physics. We don't actually want it to have physics, so I'm going to make sure that this is anchored. And I'm also going to check the collision, because you always want to do that. So studio settings, physics, no, not physics, is it rendering? No, it's studio all the way down, show decomposition. As you can see, I mean, obviously, probably better than this monstrosity that's going on with this union. Like, this is the biggest reason why you don't want to do that, because, like, look at that versus this. This is just parts. The parts have good collision, but then this is just doing demon stuff. I don't know. I think this door genuinely might actually just work. I'd either use hull collision here. Now, hull collision can't go in. It can't be concave. So this is genuinely, honestly, rather than using hull, I may as well just use box collision, so it's like solid, right? I could use precise convex if it absolutely needs to, but genuinely, I'm just gonna use box. This kind of door just needs box collision. It's fine, it'll work. Now, I actually think this model should be complicated enough for me to demonstrate what render fidelity does. So let's take this door, let's rotate it towards the sun so you can see it. And let's make it, okay, let's make it hold Alt to make it really big when we're scaling it. Right, so render fidelity with small like geometric meshes and unions, they won't come with an LOD. So what will happen is every time you import a mesh, Roblox will try to generate an LOD for it by automatic. An LOD is a level of detail, or a lower detail version of that model. If you've played Mario 64, or even like Team Fortress 2, you've seen the LOD models for Team Fortress 2, like when they explode into a mess of gibs. And that's called an LOD, a level of detail. You know, trees will become 2D PNGs far enough away, stuff like that, right? Roblox will actually auto-generate LODs for you, and in order to set your thing to use LODs, you either have your render fidelity set to automatic or performance. Now, performance will force it. As you can see, that's what the LOD looks like. If I fly far enough away, it might even get worse. Yeah, it's just a smudge. It's just a smear. And when I get closer, it should start to pop into a higher version and then a higher version. So as you can see, it's snapping into its different LOD states. Automatic, if your game is lagging, then it will start using LODs. And precise means that no matter how far away you are, it won't use any LODs. So keep that in mind depending on the mesh that you want to use. In this case, the reason why I make this door really big is so I can see what the LODs look like. I actually quite like that LOD. That's one of the nicest LODs you can have. So I'm going to set it to performance, or more accurately, I'm going to set it to performance on this door here. Now you might be thinking, oh, but I don't want my door to look ugly. Well, here's the thing. I've set this to performance now. Let's fly away from that and let's see if you can spot when it changes. Right there. I'm pretty far away. Imagine if I'm in a city and there's a bunch of these other Tudor houses in front of me, like this, for example. I'm not going to see that. So honestly, and especially with occlusion culling that's been added to Roblox, you're definitely not going to see it. So depending on your mesh and depending on your model, I would put on performance for absolutely every mesh that you have, unless there's a very specific reason why you shouldn't. And it usually is if it looks really distracting at a distance. That's the only time I would ever... Like, let's say you make like a bush and it changes shape and it will cover somebody's head from a distance. That would be an example of using precise render fidelity. So in this case, I'm going to set it to automatic. because I think that's the good best of both worlds. If somebody's lagging, they'll see a bad model. If somebody's not lagging, they won't ever notice that there was a bad model to begin with. I hope you guys learned something about optimization today. Comment down below how you yourself would optimize a roof like this. Give me any ideas you might have. And I highly suggest, if you guys want to do anything, pop into one of your old maps right now and give this Blender thing a try. Try optimize one of your old builds, because you'd be surprised how easy it is to use Blender for really, really simple stuff like this. Anyways, that's been me. Have a good day. Ka-chow.